Hey, Middle Earth Roleplaying fans, welcome back to the channel. I'm Roman Daisel. Been working on this for a couple weeks, but we're going to try something a little different, and I'm going to try and explain how I used to run a military campaign with the first edition. There's a difference between first edition and second edition, mostly with the battles and using large scale formations. But with any military campaign, obviously you're going to need a rule book, or at least you're going to need the combat screen. That'll be very important. Next, you need to pick what region you're going to use. Now, are you going to use Gondor? Are you going to use Rohan? Are you going to go to the far south? Are you going to go to Mirkwood? Are you going to go to Arnor? And for that, you're going to need all the books. You are. Because you're going to need the military stats for all these things. And then once you pick your region, you're obviously going to need your maps. And then you're going to need some kind of counters you can use from anything. I actually used from War and Peace, as well as a few other games that I had at the time from Avalon Hill. They work great. Or you can just use the little cardboard cutouts. You make your own little counters. And when you actually fight a battle, you're going to use pen and paper a lot. You're going to draw it out. And we'll discuss that later. But right now, this is just the prelude, how to get it started, and all the little things you can use. So this will be a two-part series. And the first part is just getting set up. Because there are a lot of little details you can use. You can take all the military tables and just go in and not worry about other little things. But we're going to take a look. I'm going to go through step by step. And I'm trying to remember how I used to do it. So during this video, it's going to be, okay, how did I do this? First edition is different. And there are probably other systems, game systems, that actually explain it better. But for now, just enjoy the video. And if you have any questions, let me know. So let's get into it. So in order to start a military campaign, you need to pick your timeline. And most Merc books go with a 1640 timeline, so we're going to stay with that just to simplify things. You can go into different eras and try and work with the military stats that way and how they work. But then you need a flashpoint because most wars are not set pieces. There's usually a flashpoint. One side decides to make an attack and then the other side reacts. And depending on what's going on, there's usually a flashpoint. Kind of like World War I, where you have Franz Ferdinand getting assassinated in Sarajevo. That was a flashpoint. Hitler's invasion of Poland was another flashpoint. Belli Casa is very important. Now, the Witch King doesn't really care. He's just going to attack regardless. But even he needs time to gather a large number of troops and forces, which will be detected by the Arthedanians. So there are a couple you could use. I'm going to use Arnor because it's the best example for the time period. And if you go to the Arthedain book, you could actually use this one, a frontier fight, to strike a blow against Angmar, when it has a renegade ranger operating as a bandit on the fringes between Arthedain and the Angmaran orc tribes that are situated around the border. Because according to Merp, there are 12 orc tribes that are surrounding Arthedain's northern and eastern border, applying pressure with raids and skirmishes and whatnot. They're the first line of defense for Angmar, as well as the first point of contact for them. So they constantly raid witches, and Arthedain would consider wiping a tribe out, but it would have reverberate, which is why they don't launch an all-out attack themselves. But when you throw in a renegade bandit making raids as well and stealing stuff, the Arthedain army, if it goes in and decides to wipe them out, it might trigger a broader war, which Arthedain would not really want. But that is one area you could stage as a focal point in your war in a massive military campaign, Angmar versus Arthedain. Me and a friend in Korea tried this one. It works out pretty good. But the one I was most interested in and had the most potential was from this book, The Lost Realm of Cardolan. So this one, which is Treachery. So if you play this with some player characters, you go through this, and then they go into a military campaign, because this time the Baron of Garithlin, a guy named Aranil, who's the regent, decides that instead of subsidizing a civil war in Siduri, which is in Saralane, he decides to use the mercenaries that he bought to foil the invasion plans of Arthedain. So Arthedain intends to help with the revolt. I don't know exactly why. Doesn't really say. And then Aranil also decides to get rid of his nephew, Ecorian, who is the rightful heir to the barony. He's coming of age. He favors the Arthedain himself. And let's say that this party discovers the treachery. Ecorian flees because his uncle decides to stage his coup. And Ecorian runs to Arthedain and is presented to King Argelab. The Crown Prince Arvagel and Prince Menaster decide why not add Garithlin to the Arthedain. Be a perfect opportunity. Invade Garithlin, restore Ecorian, and then have a firm ally in place. And it's so far out of the way that Angmar will not react swiftly. They can't react. It would be too late. So that is what you can do. And then, to spice it up, using interaction and influence role, you could sweeten the deal if you're a smart player for the Arthedain. You could offer Ecorian a seat on the ruling council. So on par with the 7 great noble houses of Arthedain. Because if you do another adventure in Arthedain itself, which was called Intrigue in Fornost, 1640, same time period, it's where the Tarmars and the Akitas are trying to overthrow the king. They're going to stage a coup, put someone who has royal blood on the throne, but is one of them. Marl Tarma is the guy they've chosen, who's a senior ranger captain. Let's say that plot gets foiled by maybe your adventurers, your NPCs, just doing a normal campaign. And then, as punishment, you tell the Akitas and the Tarmars that their military forces are now at the ready for the king when he wants them, as punishment. And then, of course, you bring in Ecorian as another member of the council. You use the perception roll, see if Ecorian's up for that. I think he will. It should be an easy roll, because he doesn't have a barony right now. He's going to bend over backwards to get his barony back, without thinking of the consequences. So that's the preliminary of what you need to make a military campaign. You need something, a flashpoint, a reason. Especially if you're playing Arthedain. Angmar just needs to wipe out as many Arthedanians as they can. Apply constant pressure. Arthedain lacks the strength and the resources to move against Carn Dûm by itself. Though a really violent Angmaran attack will provoke the elves to join in any battle. So the one time we played, we had one player was the Angmar, another player was Arthedain, another player represented all the various principalities of Cardolan, which was very hard to do, and then we had another one as King of Rudar. And then the GM controlled all the minor states, so Linden, Gundabad, the High Pass at Goblin Gate, Rivendell, and Moria. He could decide where to send in them if it got out of hand. So it's quite interesting that way. So we have a couple of adventures from the Arthedain book and the Cardolan book. They mesh well together, and it brings us to the focal point. Now, where are you gonna invade from? What's the closest point? Well, the closest point is really Sarn Ford. I don't have the Cardolan maps here, unfortunately, but Sarn Ford is where Prince Menaster has his garrison, and he has an understrength Nodig. Now, to understand what a Nodig is, you have to look at the Arthedain book, and it is a unit of 90 men called a Nodig. 9 common soldiers commanded by a basic royal knight, and then a captain, a knight captain commands the unit. So Prince Monastir, he has an understrength unit, as well as some other warriors who serve as garrison or caravan duty. So yeah, that's where you're going to gather your troops in order to move down. Now, how many troops do you need? That's too small a number. Because Grithlin has 14 nobles. They have 140 retainers, so each noble basically has 10 retainers. There are 60 mercenaries, and there are potentially 2,000 to 3,000 militia. 600 to 700 would be called. You could roll a 10-sided dice. Odd number, it's 700. Even number, it's 600. Something like that. Keep it simple. Plus, he also controls the ranks of the pikes, or the raggers, which is a mercenary company. They too are very high-leveled, skilled, and they add another 101 men to those ranks. So one company of the Royal Army of Arthedain is not going to help you at all. You need help. Which brings us back to the Tarmars and the Akitas. By using their military resources because of their own transgression, you could bring in a few of their units. Now, it doesn't tell you how much each noble has, unfortunately, so you kind of play with numbers. But let's say Tarmars are supposed to be the most powerful militarily, and their forces almost rival that of the kings. Same with the Akitas. But Merp only gives just over 2,500 professional noble soldiers, 360 of which are mounted, 2,160 are foot. So obviously they're not that big. What you do is there are two ways you could do it. You could roll a 1d6 and decide how many units. So these Requayan, typical knights, they command formations of either 9 or 18-man units. And there's supposed to be 140 of these units and 70 of these units within Arthedain among the noble houses. So you could decide, okay, you roll a 6 for Tarma, and then roll another one. Odd, it's the 9-man. Even, it's the 18-man. And get a number there. Or you just keep it simple and say the Tarmars and the Akitas both have to provide a full Nodeg, a full 91-man unit. Now, a Nodeg is usually divided into 30 cavalry and 60 infantry. It's a very flexible unit, tactically, on the tactical level. Noble armies don't have as many. It's probably only one cavalry unit and then 8 infantry units, or it might be 2 to 7. You'd have to go over the odds. But getting 2 full Nodegs from both these noble houses, and maybe have another full Nodeg from the Royal Army, because there's only 10 Nodegs in the entire Royal Army. Very small. I think it's too small for the time period. Or at least beef up his own Royal Nodeg to a full strength one for Prince Monastir. So he has 3 full Nodegs. Now, one thing I don't like about the Rangers of the North book, it doesn't mention militia, which is unfortunate. Like over here, it does say the Royal Guard of Fornost. It doesn't have a Royal Guard. Rangers on North Frontier, Royal Army on Royal Lands, and Noble Armies on Noble Lands. It doesn't mention anything about militia, which I find kind of weird. They do go back and fix that in the 2nd edition. They fix that little problem. But what I would do is I would make it into regions. On this map, you can see the 7 great regions. Each would have a fairly big population because they're not on the frontier itself. So for each great house, you could probably roll 1d10 and see how many hundreds of militia they can raise. For the other 56 noble houses, you'd probably roll a 1d10 and then times that by 1,000 to represent all of them. The Shire, the Hobbits, you roll a 1d6 to see how many Hobbits you get, because it doesn't even mention how many militia are in the Shire, because there is a rudimentary Shire this time. The same goes for Arthedain in Fornost. You probably roll a 1d6 for Fornos itself, and in the Royal Lands, a 1d10 by 1,000, maybe. There should be quite a few militia along the borders. Because with the numbers they give you, Angmar should just steamroll past these guys. Because Angmar can technically raise 50 to 75,000 troops, given time. Bree is another one. There should be a Breeland militia. Sarnford would also be a 1d6. Now, Breeland also has its own Breeland Guard as well, so you can get support from them. I won't suggest that, just because of where Bree is situated, maybe. But then Tyrene Gorthad is also on the Arthedain side, just because of where they are geopolitically. It'd be suicidal for them to go against Arthedain. And Arthedain also helps them with the Barrow Downs. So they would be an ally. The other thing you have to remember is that the Raggers, the ranks of the Pikes, are with Garithland. And I think if you read through the other adventures, the Dwarf Warriors, the Troik Armleish, Lisa, whatever the hell you pronounce that, they're with Callantor. And I'm not sure where Forks Violators or the Steel Riders are. So you could potentially try and buy the services of these two mercenary groups. Though Arthedain working with an Orc engineering unit is not something you would see, because it is possible for Arenal of Garithland to retreat all the way to his main keep of Barad Grithland and try and withstand a siege. But then there's these other companies in Brianz. There are currently 5 mercenary companies who will readily indulge in banditry when contracts are scarce. There are also 3 outlaw groups who will consider mercenary employment. The Heron's Death Brothers is more or less typical of both groups. So you'd have 5 mercenary companies. You could see how many of those you can get. You could do a bidding war. And the player controlling Grithland might also decide to see how much money he has. Which just comes to another point. You have to decide how much money each country has. Arthedain, being a pretty big country and prosperous, would have a large treasury. Garithland, being a small principality, would have a small treasury. But Arthedain cannot... Let's say Arthedain had 100,000 gold pieces to spend. It cannot blow all 100,000 gold pieces just on a simple, small-time military campaign down in Grithland. It's got to put most of its resources into its own army, into the upkeep of the defenses of Fornost and the north. So it can only send a small amounts of money down to Sarnford. You can roll a 1d10 to see how many gold pieces get down to Minaster. You roll 1d6 to see how much money Grithland has. Times that by 1,000 maybe, or 100. Grithland it's not a big place. It shouldn't have that much money. So once you figure all that out and you start gathering your forces, then you really need to look at pricing. Weights of exchange. Mostly you're going to look at, because you already assume that your troops have their own weapons and they already have their own weapons. The militia, they've been at war for so long, they should all have their own equipment that way. You're looking at your rations, trail rations. 1 week preserved, 14 pounds, 6 copper pieces. Do you want to make them pipeweed? Okay. How are you going to lodge them at Sarnford when you start gathering your forces? Are you going to keep them on the ground? What type of year are you doing this? That's another important question. Time of year. Are you going to do this in the winter, the spring, the summer, or the fall? I would go with early fall, myself. It's a shorter campaign season, but then Angmar can't react. Or another country, say Callantor, decides to intervene. It's possible you could roll, maybe Arenal calls for help from Tinara and Callantor. It's possible. It would be very hard for them to go against, especially with their resources. Saralane, which is in a civil war right now, would not do it. Feotar is too far out of the way. Gondor would not be interested. Only Rudar and Angmar would be interested, but they're too far away to influence the outcome. There was the Warlord one, but you kind of figure the Warlord is already wiped out. Or maybe that was supposed to be the Arthedain invasion. Maybe the Warlord will come in. It's up to the GM to decide if the Warlord is still around. From the Cardolan book. So like I said, you got to figure out how much food you're going to have. So remember, 14 pounds, 1 week preserved, that's just per person. So you got to times that by how many guys you're going to bring. How many of your militia are you going to bring? Are you going to use transport? So you really have to think how long are you going to be in the field? For this kind of a small campaign, I would say 3 weeks max, maybe a month. Or are you going to float things down the Barren Dune and hire some rivermen to ferry your supplies downstream? When you make supply depots, a supply route, you have to drop off, and that's where you have these garrison caravan duties, these Otari. Arthedain militia and these fighters would make great guys you can drop off to guard your supply line. In second edition Arnor book, they go through a great campaign against the Warlord for this, where they have forces from Arthedain, Garithlin, Tanar, and Kalantar fighting against the Warlord to stamp it out. It's a great scenario to play, but we're not that far yet. This is just strictly first edition. So you figure all these things out from a money standpoint, because the sinews of war are run by infinite supplies of money. I think Cicero said that. Without money, you can't have a war. Which brings me back to the grand campaign with Angmar and Arthedain. Angmar according to their campaign book, have a staggering treasury, like a dragon's. Now, you can take that with a grain of salt, considering that Angmar is a resource-poor country, and would have to bring a lot of tribute over from the east to fund their adventures. So they have long supply lines. They spend a lot of their money on that. You might decide you want to upgrade your militia so they're better equipped. Some things like backpacks, boots. Boots are very important. Don't want to make sure they're booted. If clothing, arrows, rope. There's so many things you could do it. You could do it quickly, saying, okay, you're going to spend so many gold pieces on equipment. The GM could do that to make it faster. But if you really want to do a correct military campaign, you have to plan. It's planning. Half it's planning. The other half is execution. Now, once all your forces are gathered, Garithlin can try and make perception rolls. If they have any spies, Garithlin could send out spies, and they could see if they can perceive a perception roll by a spy. But it'd be hard, and the distance involved would be very long. By the time the spy goes there, finds out what's going on, and gets back, the Arthedain army might already be on its way. There's also that to consider. But a Garithlin spy could possibly figure it out. But again, you don't know where they're going to go. If a Corian is seen at the campsite, then yes, the odds are a Corian will be there. So with him there, the odds are, if there's a Garithlin spy, he'll figure it out that's where the Arthedain army is going, and he would have to make his way back. So Garithlin would have less time to prepare than Arthedain does. You could also use the main rulebook to see about equipment and price table. I don't think the Cardolan book has a price table, per se. Yeah, weather table. Autumn would be kind of rainy. If you go in like October, you definitely want to go in the first month of August. The first month of September would be your nominal, your optimal. Any later, you're running into a lot of rain. Summer, you're running into a lot of heat and dry. When you're going in the summer, you got to remember streams and wells will dry up. Case in point, the American Civil War, there was a lot of fighting over streams and muddy pools, just looking for water. Some flashpoints happen there for a battle. You don't want to go in a rainy season, getting bogged down. You read anything about the American Civil War, mud marches were common. Getting bogged down in Georgian mud from the state of Georgia was never a good idea. You could have flooding, which would ruin your day in a heartbeat, especially if you're following the line of the Barren Dune. So once you get all your forces ready, you have to pick a leader. Now, Prince Menaster is probably going to lead this little adventure. Now, for some reason, first edition, some of the books gave you a strategy and tactics for individuals. Others do not. And it kind of sucks, but the numbers are so high. So what you want to do is you want to decide, pick your leaders. So Prince Menaster is going to be one commander. and you roll 1d6. Except for if you roll a 6, that would be a 0. In this case, unless it's the Witch King. The Witch King automatically gets a 6. Everyone else is 1 to 5 with 6 meaning 0. Just because, and that's your strategy tactics. So when you're fighting a battle, you add your bonus as a leader to that one. Grithlin, Aerenal would not be much of a military commander, or he would choose somebody and it would be you put a lesser value on him. Maybe 1d6 divided by 2, or something like that. It's possible to have a 0 in case you have an inept military leader. The mercenary captains would obviously have a bigger tactical value. But again, it's up to the discretion of the GM and the player to designate. So we made a rudimentary military table for now. We have the Arthedain army, got the army of Sarenford. There's going to be the Dagor Maren, the Royal Army. It's basically a 91-man unit. There's a captain, a Requiem Lord, which is going to be Minaster, the prince. But because he's going to command the army, he will designate somebody else to lead it. There'll be 9 sub-captains or lieutenants, 27 cavalrymen, and 54 infantry. I have the level, basically it's a level 4 unit, because we're not going to worry about the captain and lieutenants. In the second edition, they make them level 5s, but we're going to go with Rangers of the North, which makes them a level 4. Now they use chainmail 14 and 13 as their armor type, which means if they come into contact with somebody who's got rough leather, level 9, let's say, like the militia here, then they get that bonus. So chainmail 14 against rough leather 9 is a bonus of 5. DB, the militia have a bigger bonus than the Otari Rin, so they get a 10. But the primary weapon, the melee bonus versus the militia, they have a bigger bonus, and even if they use their arch arrows. So it does affect how things are. Or if you want, you can just say, okay, you have a chain, you have rough leather, it's a bonus of only +1. Same with DB. You have the better weapons, the better armor, the better defensive bonus. I'm just going by what the books say. So when it comes to these numbers, the melee bonus is obviously your primary weapon, your sword, spear, whatever. And your missile bonus is if you choose to fire arrows. So when it comes to battle, you can sit there and fire arrows while they charge. Now you notice I haven't filled in the Dagenham Editor yet. They're level 3s. But they're basically equipped the same as the Royal Army. Almost same, slightly different. And then we have the Dagenham Etheron, which is the militia. We don't know how many of them yet we have. They are level 2. They wear rough leather. And so forth. Let's find out how many we get. So, we want to see, in the Rangers of the North book, they have formations of either 9 or 18. So we're going to see how many of the 9s we can get. Roll the dice, and we get 6 of the 9s. And we're going to make them into the cavalry. So 6 times 9 is 54. Good roll. Let's roll this again. And we get another 6. 6 times 18, making me do math now, is 108. So we're going to have 108 infantry and 54 cavalry. Which means we're going to have 12 of these Requiem with us. As far as the Row Rider goes, we're going to have 1, and that's going to be Marl Tarma. He's going to be forced to serve under Prince Minaster as punishment. Now militia. We're going to get 400 militia. This is going to be a sizable army. Pretty good to start with. So we're looking at a force of about 600 men. Now Grithlin at full muster has 140 retainers with 14 arrows. About half the lesser nobles of Her Grithlin will answer a summons to war. So let's see if we can change the dice. Change to a D10 and roll. Let's say 9. We'll give him the benefit of the doubt. Only 9 of his retainers are going to answer the call to war, which means this will go down to 90. The other 5 are going to stay home. The mercenaries are his. Then the Ragakran Seeger are the ranks of the Pikes. They're the major mercenary companies. The other three major mercenary companies are already being under contract to other people. The Steel Riders are with Tanaar. The Dwarf Warriors are with Kalantar, and the Forax Violators are also with Tanaar at this time. Now, there are 5 other mercenary companies, and anyone can get them. Now, at first I thought of using a recruitment table. We're just going to make this simple and go with a 1d100, and we will roll for all the principalities. So for the first mercenary company, Arthedain rolls a 50. Garithlin rolls 100. Garithlin will get the first mercenary company. I'm only going to roll for the other principalities. The second mercenary company, Arthedain rolls a 91. Garithlin rolls a 25. Tanaar rolls a 70. Kalantar rolls a 96, so Kalantar is in the lead. Feotar rolls an 84. So already we've lost 2 mercenary companies. Alright, I'm going to clear this. Arthedain gets a 31, Garithlin a 76, Tanaar 87, Kalantar 37, Feotar 3. Well, Saralane 78. So it's going to Kalantar. So that's 3. Let's go with number 4. Arthedain rolls a 46, Garithlin rolls an 18, Tanaar rolls an 89, Kalantar rolls 58, Feotar rolls 55, and 33 goes to Saralane. So it's 89, which is Tanaar. Tanaar has now 2 mercenary companies under their control. Alright, the last mercenary company. Arthedain 53, 73, 4, 47, 82, 17. So Garithlin gets 1 mercenary company. Arthedain's not getting any. So we're going to call them Harran's Death Brothers, because that's what's mentioned in the book. There will be captain, sergeants, regulars, and foragers. So 1, 6, 40, 30. Really don't need to put all these for the captains and the sergeants. They're just going to become part of the regular portion, but just in case something comes up. I don't worry about if they have shields or greaves or anything like that. There. Now I also didn't put Grithlin's militia. We'll do 600 militia for him. So the odds are fairly even as far as that goes, though quality is not the same, obviously. Now we go to leaders. Prince Menaster is obviously one of the leaders. We're going to put Harran, who is a captain. He controls his own little... Marl Tarma is also a 2. So if Prince Menaster were ever to fall, so to speak, Marl Tarma could easily command the army. If Arenal falls, and no one can command the army, they'd be just individual units fighting. Now let's go with a rating. So when we do this, we're going to do 6 is going to be labeled as 0 if you get a 6. Prince Menaster is going to be a 5, and Tarma is going to be a 2. Garithlin is going to be a 0. Tarhad, though, is much better, and Harran is just a 3. So those are their ratings. But Tarhad can only command his own company and not anyone else. So as far as an army bonus goes, Arenal is a 0. If Tarhad is in whatever company Tarhad is with, he'll be a 4, and Harran will be a 3. Marl Tarma faces off against Tarhad. Tarhad will get a 4 bonus because it's 4 plus is 0 for Ernil. But then Marl Tarma will be a 2 plus 5, 7. So 7 against 4 will be a plus 3 difference. And vice versa. So you're always going to get your army bonus. But tactically, if you're in part of the combat, I could go make lists for every company. But I won't. Just the main guys for now. So there we have that. One thing I did forget was to add some Rangers to the army of Sarn Ford. Now the problem is none of the books in the first edition mention what Rangers. Rangers of the North doesn't mention how many Rangers Arthedain has, which was really odd, and they corrected that in the second edition. In the campaign atlas, the Northwestern campaign atlas, they did list 1,000 Rangers, but I can never find any stats on them. So I'm using the stats from the guy that's in Bree, the Ranger there, Helvorn, which kind of corresponds with what's in the second edition book. So he's an 8 level with chainmail armor, 70 DB, 108 broadsword, 96 with a crossbow. Alright? So I added, and then I rolled a dice, 1d6 times 10, to see how many I got, and I came up with 50. So I rolled a 5, got 50 Rangers, which I think is a little excessive, but what can you do? Now I have 715 men in this army of Sarn Ford. And I also calculated how many gold pieces he's going to have. I went to the core book, and Arthedain is very rich, so I gave him 5 rolls, and I came up with roughly 500 gold pieces. I had to convert some silver and bronze, but I came up with 500 gold. And I did the same thing with Grithlin. Went with a food and lodging table, as well as transport to see how much I'm going to need. I picked 3 weeks of trail rations for 715 men, which is about 21 gold pieces total, and it's 30,000 pounds. Now I figure they can carry the first week on their backs, which is only 14 pounds, but the rest needs to be definitely carried somehow. So I picked up 16 wagons, which is 24. They can carry 24,000 pounds. 1,500 each, which it's an 8-foot wagon. And I wasn't sure how many ponies. Do I need 2 ponies per wagon or do you need 4? So I went with 2 ponies per wagon. So I got 32 ponies at 128 gold pieces total. Now I know they're listed in silver pieces. So that's quite a big wagon train. And then I did 2 days of lodging. So it's going to take 2 days for the army to get together and then march out the next day. That might be a low figure. I might not need that many wagons or that many ponies, but that's what I'm going with. It's at the discretion. You can completely cancel out this part of a military campaign, though it is. And I played one where we didn't worry about supplies. And then I played another where we did worry about supplies. You could also set up supply depots but that means you have to drop off soldiers, and the Arthedain army doesn't have that many soldiers to drop off. So we're all gonna go in this together. For Grithlin, they only have 100 gold pieces to play with. 2 weeks of trail rations for their mercenaries, because the other units from Grithlin, they're not going to gather until the last minute, and they're going to bring their own rations with them. If they're victorious, Aranel will reimburse them later, type idea. They're going to get the mercenaries are going to get 3 gold pieces worth of poor lodging for 2 weeks, which is like 1 copper piece. 1,000 copper is 1 gold. 100 bronze is 1 gold, and 10 silver is 1 gold. Something like that. And then I rolled a 1d6 times 10 to see how much the raggers are getting paid for 2 weeks. So the raggers are getting 50 gold pieces, and the Haran's death are getting 25, and then the mercs that are in the common employ are getting 10, because they're getting their food and beverage on top of that, as well as lodging. The mercenaries, they live in Minas Grithlin, so it's not a big deal. But Harans and raggers need the lodging, so they get the lodging plus their food for 2 weeks. The mercs are part of the castle, so they don't worry about that. So there we go. We have everything set. We have the campaign all set. Everything's all set now. So this is just the pre-setting, what we're going to do, how we're going to do it, what we have to play with. We have our starting point, Sarn Ford. We have our focal point, which is going to be the barony of Grithlin, minus Grithlin. We have our target, which is Arenil, the usurper, who usurped the barony from his nephew Icorian. And Arthedain's going to take action against him. The Arthedain, they gather their forces at Sarn Ford, and they're ready to march. That's quite a long wagon train, but I couldn't do anything about that. Grithlin has a couple of mercenary companies that are sitting in the eastern part of their border, waiting for Prince Monaster's army to appear. They think Prince Monaster is going to appear with only a small unit to help Tenar with the warlord. So that's what Tenar is doing at this point. But the Arthedain decided to go after Grithlin instead. So the Raggers and the Huron's Death Brothers are waiting for whatever appears out of Sarn Ford. And by now reports must make their numbers bigger. So we'll see. So in part 2 of this series, we're going to go through the maps, and we're going to play the actual military campaign. So stay tuned for that. And until next time, this has been Roman Daisel. I am out here.